Buongiorno. Uno, due, uno, due.
La sostenibilità ci riguarda da vicino, molto da vicino. La nostra indifferenza ha un prezzo. Gli obiettivi dell'Agenda 2030 sono l'unica strada possibile. Siamo in tanti ad impegnarci. Partecipa al Festival dello Sviluppo Sostenibile.
Buongiorno a tutti.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome in this beautiful room in an extremely fragile city to talk about sustainability. We are in the right place, I think. I am Alberto Bollis. I am Vice Director of the magazines of the NEM Group, Nord-Est Multimedia, from Trieste to Udine, from Venice to Treviso, from Padua to Belluno. A young group that is relatively active, proactive, and in this case, it plays the role of a media that is trying to send the message we are trying to send outwards. Welcome to those who are here and those who are in streaming, connecting in streaming online. And the meeting will be recorded. We are at the 9th edition of the Festival for a Sustainable Future, that is to say, a mobilization promoted by the Italian Alliance for Sustainable Development, ASVIS. And as you've seen in the video, we refer to Agenda 2030 of the UN, with a number of initiatives that are planned. The inauguration of the festival took place in Milan on the 7th of May. We discussed in particular the sustainable transition for companies and for the productive system. And in that case, Milan was the right place. On that occasion, we presented the ASVIS report for spring. It is an annual report, and it contained a very interesting figure. They have calculated that should we speed up energy transition, energy, digital, and ecological transition in view of a zero carbon transformation, the GDP would be higher than 1.1% in 2035. And I would like to recall that the growth forecast for Italy for next year amount to 0.7%. So the result would be significant. The growth would be exponential in 2050, with a growth by 8.4%. This type of trends have a positive impact both on industry and agriculture, but also for services and the ordinary citizens, for the environment. There are extremely positive consequences if we try to contrast and to fight climate change, adapting to it. The second step was just a few days ago in Genoa. We discussed biodiversity as a strategic resource for the economy and for society. Today we are here at the third step of the festival, the third phase, two major events. This morning's event with a consistent group of speakers, we will discuss the fragility of the territory and climate change, with a number of thoughts about the opportunities long-term planning can provide us with. We cannot limit ourselves to thinking of what might happen tomorrow. We should try and think in the longer term. Tomorrow, instead, at Procuratie Vecchie in Samart Square, we will discuss a future ecosystem, and that will be another step in our program. Participation in this festival was really extraordinary in these first 10 days. During the first week, we reached a total, thanks to the support of the media, and the official media are ANSA and I, with the support of other media that covered the events of the festival both in Milan and Genoa, Secolo XIX, the Quotidiano Nazionale, Corriere della Sera. 1,200,000 people were informed about the results of these works, and more than 500,000 people took part in the online streaming of the event. In the NEM group, Northeast Multimedia Group, we managed to transmit, to broadcast the live streaming on our websites, and we are certainly contributing. We had a nice interview to the scientific director of the festival, Giovannini, a few days ago. On the newspapers tomorrow and today on the websites, we will have a first coverage, a first narration of what we are going to discuss here in this room. These figures and the participation of the civil society deny the lack of interest for sustainability issues in the world. In Venice, besides the two events I've just mentioned before, we will have 91 events promoted by the civil society and that will discuss and face climate change, cinema, festivals, educational projects, autonomy, energetic autonomy and autarky. You know that in the Veneto region we have a large number of universities and scientific institutions that are facing this theme. Our meeting today, our workshop today, it is organized in collaboration with La Biennale di Venezia. We are here in the headquarters of La Biennale di Venezia. The International Architecture Exhibition has just been inaugurated. We are following the guidelines of architecture. We will try and discuss the possibility of defending cities and urban centers from the effects, the most serious effects of climate change, the rise in sea level. We know very well what this means for Venice, for example. Extreme weather events, fires, high temperatures that endanger not only the citizens but also the monuments. Venice is a monument itself, historic buildings, urban spaces. Venice is a symbol of this fragility. We should find a way to integrate architecture to transform it into something sustainable and adaptation policies that are essential to guarantee the possibility to safeguard the cities. We should try and explore innovative solutions combining both respect for our historic heritage with resilient strategies and urban transformation. We have in this room experts, public administrators, citizens. So starting with the public administration, let us invite the mayor of this fantastic city, Venice. It is not only the the historic center of Venice, but it is also the mainland. I invite here on stage Luigi Brugnaro, the mayor of Venice. We have 4 chairs on stage. You can sit wherever you want.
Right, a few words before reading out a couple of lines I wrote. I would like to thank ASFIP for this incredible commitment that you've shown. I mean, you've been doing incredible things in Italy, in addition to what you are doing today. And I agree with you when you say that you need to talk. and you need to talk about climate change and what we can do, and also jobs related to the mitigation of effects derived from climate change. And I believe that that is actually the core of the climate fight. Now, there are okay, clear ideas about that, but many believe that the environment will adjust itself. It doesn't. I mean, working on the environment and just shaping the environment, this is something that Venice has always been doing, and it's something very smart to do. And I'm going also to discuss that with Giovannini. I actually like his ideas, and I hope that we can meet and that we can also talk to the government and talk to Europe and explain to Europe the slight tweaks, if you wish, that are needed in the environmental policies, not in the contents of them. I mean, what they say is absolutely correct, but what we can do to implement them. I mean, this is actually an enterprise that has many stakeholders. Yours is actually a non-for-profit organization that is very pragmatic, and you are you're just doing practical things like, for instance, the regeneration of an urban park at zero costs. And again, we do that. And again, I prove that I can do it just through partnerships, through soft power, through diplomacy, through these things. We can just sit around a table and we can let that effort progress. It's not, it's not just stifling, it's not just killing. The enthusiasm is just letting it thrive. When you mention urban parks, I actually reached Sans Marks today, and the Sans Marks gardens used to be neglected. Well, yeah. Fair enough. Yes. Okay. In that case, it's the gardens and the municipality cares. The municipality cares for them. But the idea is that there is partnership. There is dialogue, and if you have that, of course, everything can get better and better. Of course, you need to be able to promote that dialogue. All right. I wish actually to greet all of you. I wish to greet all of the speakers. I understand that Mr. Razzi is remotely connected, listening to us. But I mean, he launched a very interesting Biennale, very brave ideas. So nice projects, nice young teams at the very center. I wish also to thank Giovannini, who is the scientific director of ASVIPS, and people in attendance. I wish to thank the organizers for inviting me, because I actually want to share with you some ideas about how Venice is governing water matters. We are all very aware that Venice, over the years, has been working a lot on this. And the reason why I've written down these things is that I want to focus. I do believe that these projects are also very interesting for young people. Well, of course, Venice is at the forefront of the challenge due actually to climate change. But over these centuries, Venice has shown that it does have a faith in human ingenuity. Over these centuries, Venice has been able to govern water and has turned threats into opportunities. And still nowadays, that's the case. It's a fragile city. So Venice and its lagoon landscape are actually the result of a very dynamic mechanism that shows how man interacts with the ecosystem. So the anthropic effect is marked by ingenuity, as I said. So it has to do with architecture. It has to do with managing high hydraulic system. And water acts as a sort of transition, and it has different forms and shapes. So it can be superficial, it can be underground water, it can be brackish water, it can be springs, it can be fresh water. Well, using technology, we've been able to cross those lines sometimes. During the COVID period, we were able in Venice to finally erect the Mosa. And the Mosa kept the high tide out of the lagoon. And we have been using the barriers 100 times since. It took courage, you know, and I was present at the first episode of the move being lifted to keep the tide out. You know, it takes boldness. It takes also some decision. You need to make decisions. Well, the city of Venice has a call for investment for policies to mitigate the climate effects of the change. So, for instance, we have created reservoirs of water in Mestre just to make sure that it is hydraulically saved. And there's also vis-a-vis, for instance, extreme weather events, like, for instance, whirlwinds or sort of tornado-like situations. We have invested some 100 million euros for these reservoirs and just ancillary works. Now, it's a huge reservoir. It is underground, and it was actually made during the COVID period once again. The works were massive, and people are happy now, but in the making, people were not that happy. Sorry, they thought that we were kind of ruining the environment. But we were not, because, again, it makes sure that system, for instance, that you keep the rain water separate from sewage, for instance. And it also makes sense that you have, I mean, the ancillary works in that case, that you have many sensors on the water lines so that, again, we manage waters. You might have seen it if you came through the Ponte della Libertà, so the Libertà Bridge. There are some freshwater pipelines, so the ducts, they were laid in 1872, and we are just refurbishing them nowadays. So we then also launched a project to have 23 hectares of the Marzeno area once again reclaimed. Again, this is part of the urban environment that is being rediscovered through public-private partnerships. So in that case, there is a small river, and the area around the delta of that small river is being turned into a park. So again, there's reclamation of land as a twofold goal, that of course, rediscovering areas that can be used for entertainment, but also they create safety, because you can create other areas just by the riverbanks that can capture water in case of overflowing. And that's managing and it's shaping the landscape, the territory. Now, there is another school of thought, and there is another train of thought having to do with the idea that you should let the landscape alone, and you should let the environment alone, and that man should not mingle with that. We believe that the contrary is instead the case. We should be committed to, again, look at the situation, and again, let us not play down on the threats, the environmental threats. We should instead be intelligent and be smart. I mean, climate change is there. I'm not denying it at all. It is there. What we need to do, though, is finding ways to overcome them. And again, believe in progress, believe in growth. Now, Venice is campus city. It's another project, and the idea is that of attracting young people students from Europe, and we want to offer them more and more services. And then we have the industrial estate in Porto Marghera. So there are a number of patents linked to that, and Nata, for instance, is a Nobel Prize winner that launched some of those forward-looking patents, including hydrogen. So there are things that were done in the past that are now leading the research. So for many centuries, people have tried to, so to speak, to find ways to save Venice. We believe instead that Venice has ideas that it could share with the world. For instance, we are now investing a lot in hydrogen. So we have 60 buses that run on hydrogen. We have a plan to produce hydrogen in Marghera. It's being built. It's the first time ever in Italy. It's the start of a green renovation. There were, when I first took office, there were 170 companies. At the end of my mandate, 900. It's just an example. But hydrogen in the past, so in the present is also the case, it has been an engine of innovation, so to speak. It has triggered innovation. And in Venice, Venice has been able to understand how important it was to protect this human production, and we've been able to attract again. In the past, Venice, the most serene Republic of Venice, has always been able to attract bright minds. You know, Venice is the most ancient cities of the future, so to speak. So challenges, they can actually be handled only if you engage in a dialogue. So Venice has been, again, nurturing a dialogue with other cities that face similar challenges. I'm thinking of Odessa, for instance. We are talking with them concerning the protection of human, the human heritage in city centers. Or Bangkok. In that case, we are working in the field of water management. I was talking just a few hours ago to the Hiroshima delegation, and I promised to them that we would create with them a museum for peace in Venice, just to show the millions of tourists in Venice what war looks like. That comes from an idea by Joe Straley. So, again, we can make Venice the capital of peace. So, yes, the queen of the seas, the queen of the waters. Venice is ready to just face this new challenge. So, between the 29th of May to the 2nd of June, there will be the nautical trade fair. So has become actually a point of reference for green engines. So we do not just talk about nautical things and boats, but we are talking about green revolution. So again, in many cases, you might see water as a divisive element. In Venice, it is just a joining element. So the nautical trade show has become a point of reference because of the prototypes that have been launched there and the patents linked to those. People who just master the seas, they master the world, so to speak. So I wish to thank all of you. Thank you for playing along and wanting to build this future that is correct, fair, just, and shared. Thank you very much. I wish to thank you, Mr. Lord Mayor. There would be very many topics actually to be addressed, and I think there is also a problem here in Venice with over-tourism. So you have massive flows of tourists, and I understand that you are trying to manage also those flows, right? Correct, but correct. Yeah. So the resident population is just declining. So there is a depopulation, and there is a social topic linked to that, and has to do with just the dropping childbirth rate, for instance, in Italy, and the depopulation is also a result of that. But then, of course, there is also the idea of attracting people who, when they come, they should actually respect our rules, and we also did a lot there. Now, the depopulation, as I said, I mean, it's a cultural aspect also. You cannot solve it just encouraging people to have more children. But then, yes, you have tourism. So we thrive with tourism. Of course, you might have the problem of over tourism, and you need to manage flows. That's about it. So, again, we are open. Venice is open. The idea is that we want people to reserve their place. And this is actually an example that we've set, and it takes courage actually to launch it. Because again, it has been a certain way for many years, and then last year we introduced this idea of book in advance. But I understand that, again, you've set an example there because you also have over-tourism up in the mountains, and some other places are taken. I mean, they're just looking at you as an example. So Carlo Ratti is now with us, is connected remotely, but here we can see him on the screen. And okay, he is actually the curator of the 19th Biennale of Architecture. I will give you the floor. So, of course, Biennale was inaugurated like 3 days ago, and it will be open until November. The topic is sustainability and the integration of architecture with sustainable development. So I just give the floor to you, please.
Buongiorno a tutti.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome. How long do you want me to speak? 10 minutes. I will be shorter. We are somewhat late. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being in Venice. A couple of words. First of all, allow me to thank the mayor. He has already said many things. Biennale will transform Venice into a laboratory. The title is Intelligence, Natural, Artificial, Collective. You might visit the Arsenale in the afternoon. And it is the idea, as you said, dealing with how architecture can support the social life in terms of mitigation, reduction of emission, but we think that architecture should increasingly turn to adaptation, to adapt to a changing world, to a changing climate. And in the Arsenale, you will see a couple of references. At the entrance, there is a flooded Arsenale with a very high heat in the first 2 rooms. It is the climate of Venice in the future, for example. And the second reference is a link to depopulation. How many people will be able to exploit our future designs? For whom are we designing our buildings and our realities? The second part, therefore, deals with the future of the population. And we are trying to put together many disciplines, many different types of intelligence, natural, artificial, collective. We have Jeffrey West, a physicist, the director of the Santa Fe Institute, a professor of Harvard studying bacteria, for example, Roberto Ford. Bacteria that can create communities that are similar to cities. You will see Mark Whibley and Beatrice Colovina, the dean of the Columbia University and of Princeton. They deal with architecture, but they are at the border with biology. And then Patrizia Melchiorre, who has transformed this second room into a mountain. After the flooded Arsenale, you will see a mountain representing the growth of the human population on the Earth over the last few years. It is now decreasing instead. China has lost 2 million inhabitants last year. Japan has an aging population. In Italy, the fertility rates are much lower than the rate that is necessary to keep the population at a steady level. But starting from bacteria and other natural systems, we will try and look at our future. 3 sections: natural, artificial, collective intelligence, and architecture responds in different ways. Natural means learning from nature with materials and with the logics adopted by nature. In the artificial section, you will see something else I am fond of. At the center, there are networks of sensors and a beautiful contribution by my colleague in Venice, who invented the web. And then you will find Nobel Awards, Martin Riesil, the Royal Astronomer, the best-known astrophysicist in the world. And then you will also find the possibility of cyborgs and humanoid robots changing our cities. You expect these robots in the accelerating technology, artificial intelligence. You expect these systems, these intelligent systems that can respond and transform something inanimate into something that is alive. You expect them to bring this artificial intelligence system into the body of a humanoid robot. And we have the Boston, MIT, and the Turin Politecnico, but also the industry in Italy, that together are trying to understand how these transformations will have an impact on our way of building and producing goods, and how we should manage these innovations. An inventor, an American inventor of the past used to say, you should be architects for the future and not victims of the future. We should test technology and try and understand how we can use it and how we should not use it in order to not to be victims of technologies. And then there is a third section, collective intelligence, the beauty of learning from one another. In Venice, we have generations that are learning from the previous generations how to live in a wonderful space, the lagoon. The last section is out, connected with the exploration of the space. We do not have the point of view of Elon Musk trying to colonize space. We rather prefer to explore space in order to better understand our Earth. Martin Wies, the Royal Astronomer, professor at the Royal Cambridge University, he says that the Earth is the most suited place for human beings. Any place outside the world, it has conditions that are the most extreme and much worse than the conditions we have in the Antarctic area. There are 2 things I would like to say. Why Venice is at the center and why you are at the center of our study today. Venice is at the center because, as the mayor was saying, Venice is an extraordinary laboratory, the most fragile city in the world, facing the crisis of climate, of tourism. But it can become the city where architecture can find new interdisciplinary solutions. I invite you to visit the Arsenale, Venice as a laboratory, and then you should also see all of this as an evolutionary system, not just an exhibition at the MoMA in New York, where everything is ready-made, but rather a dynamic system, like a superorganism, a chain reaction, where different ideas meet, clash, and collaborate. I am sorry I cannot be there with you. I was called to Rome for a problem linked with a future project curated by La Biennale. You are at the center because in La Biennale we have 3 conferences normally, meetings of architecture, where architects talk to one another. I have always considered them to be the wrong format. So we decided instead to give space to all those who might have a voice in that. You will find at the center of the Arsenale a space for conversations and workshops in the area of artificial and collective intelligence, a place where meetings and debates can take place. We will also host a meeting with ASFIS this afternoon. If you want to come back, you are welcome. We will go on with small and large-sized events. A coalition of Venetians who have decided to organize events connected with participation and the problems related to the recovery of some spaces like the Church of Sant'Anna. And then other collaborations with institutional partners, C40 that will join us, COP30, and then the Aspen Institute, the Davos Cultural Alliance. They will all collaborate with La Biennale on different platforms, and I'm happy you are in Venice today. I am sorry I cannot be there. You have my team there, so should you need anything, my team will accompany you there. Anna Lima is in the room with you. Enrico, I thank you, and see you soon, I hope. Thank you, Carlo. We wish you successful work. And we are now expecting to learn from you what kind of event La Biennale and the government are studying together. It should be announced tomorrow, a large event in La Biennale, and then at the center of COP30 in Belen this year. Thank you.
Right, so again, to frame a little bit, this climate change and Venice, we have mentioned Venice because it's hosting us, but we are actually talking about climate change that has repercussions on all of us. So we would like now to draw on the direct experience of a number of people who've been working with RAI, so it's the Italian broadcast company. And here we have Veronica Fernandez. She's a journalist working from the United States, and she will be telling us a couple of things. She's a correspondent, a video, okay. Well, all of our islands will disappear in 25 years. They will actually be overflooded. So Augusto Boy is Iscariana Lomera, is one of the 25 islands that, according to the Panama Ministry of Environment, will actually sink due to global warming. There will a huge rising of the sea levels in this area of the Atlantic. Up until 3 years ago, we had a sandbank, and no, not any longer. So East Berdiala is in the Caribbean, but it's no heaven. So it's actually like this. It's shanty dwellings. It's actually marginalized people. There is no fresh water. And yet they have a flag waving. And you can see that is actually a sign of the fight for their independence. Since the 90s, the is some sort of attempt at mitigating the effects of climate change. So they've been moving the dwellings towards the inside of the island. So they first moved them and then they left the land. So they are the early climate refugees in Latin America. So this village was set up for them on mainland, and it's a project by the government that launched a massive deforestation campaign to free the land and build new villages. Now, for instance, this old lady, she reached actually this place 6 months ago just because the original village had been totally flooded. So you can see she's wearing nice bracelets, the traditional bracelets that she makes herself. Israelis, she's this lady, and she's telling us that there was no floor. And in December, as the water just began rising, I had to leave, she says. So from time to time, she gets relatives visiting her, and she hopes that the government is creating new dwellings also for her acquaintances so that they can start a new life there. Okay, right now, Luciana Sgueglia from TG3. So this is actually the news from, here we go. Lucia, no, sorry, we have a different person. I'm sorry, Lucia. Okay, but connected remotely. So nice to see you, Lucia. How are you? Sorry, Lucia, you need actually to unmute it. You are muted. Can you unmute? Good. Yes, we can hear you now. Fine. Thank you. I just wanted to spend a few words. So Venice, in fact, has also the problem of islands that appear and disappear. So Cadiporto, Malamocco, Baccano, there are some very close to the Lido Island. But a couple of months ago, I think that I heard or I read some headlines because in fact, because of a strange combination of the tide and the water flows, there was a sort of sandbank that appeared and then disappeared. So it was an ephemeral type of islands, very intriguing flows you have in the lagoon. But again, maybe we can draw a parallel to Panama and some other situations elsewhere. Well, Lucia, instead, what are you about to tell us? Well, actually, we've heard talking about a climate threat that is looming. Rising sea levels. Let me instead tell you something about a catastrophic event that could have had forecast, and it's the Valencia floods and the flooding. And in Italy, we've had similar events, one in Emilia-Romagna, one in Marche. But the one that we saw in Valencia back in October, 29th of October, 2024, it happened during the night. Evening, between 6 o'clock and 8 o'clock. And for you to understand the time frame, you mentioned mitigation, prevention, but also responses. So we got there on the 31st in the morning, and what we found was this. So there was a big red area, so to speak, 4,000 hectares. That is different in terms of how many people live there compared to Emilia-Romagna and Marche because it's highly populated. We found thousands and thousands of cars in the streets. They had been turned upside down. They were clogging up the streets completely. There were tons of waste. There was mud. And it took weeks to free the areas from mud. In some areas, it was like Pai Porta, that was the very core of the flooding. It was knee-high. So, again, I can remember this old lady, and you can see her in the video, and she said, we need food, comida, because no rescuers had arrived yet. In Italy, sometimes we tend to complain that we are not fast enough, but typically in Italy, in case of these situations, we're very fast. Instead, there in Spain, in Valencia, a couple of days after the event, there were no rescuers, there were no police, there were nobody, so people were enraged totally. We talked about vulnerable areas, but also areas that are very much changed by the anthropic action. Now, in Valencia, for instance, this event did not hit the city center at all. It actually hit an area in the outskirts of Valencia, the province of Valencia. Why? Well, maybe you are already aware of that, because the river that used to, the Turia, that used to cross Valencia, and that had flooded the city multiple times, the last time in 1957. It had been reorganized, and it had been made to just run outside the city during Francisco Franco. There had been other events linked to the Turia, the Turia management, one to do with the dike that broke in 1982. But actually, it had made to just end its flow west of city, and that's an area that is not massively populated. It was actually a farmland predominantly, so people doing farming, also rice farming, and nowadays there are settlements there. They are inhabited by working class people, many truck drivers, maybe logistics people. Many of them, they actually work in logistics. So rice, as I said, is a crop there, a very popular crop, and so are oranges. And typically, these are dwellings that are just, as you can see, it's a mixture actually of newer and older homes, but typically they are just one floor, not affluent people. So during this extreme event, it was not the river. So the new river, so to speak, the new riverbed is much wider than the old Turia. So it's a sort of canal there. But there were like 4 streams instead. They call them barranco. These are streams. It looks like that area is flat land, but it's not, because actually the water came from the Chiva. These are hills, 270 meters high, very low. But actually, these streams, there is a slope there, and they come down very quickly. They had also tried to create banks in advance. But again, typically, you would not expect that type of massive inflow of water. But here, if you combine that with an extreme event, so you have storms that are extremely raging. So in few hours in Valencia, they got the rainfall that they would normally get in months. So in some areas, it would be like the rainfall that they would get in 1 year, so the experts said. So it meant that in certain areas there was really a massive concentration of water mixed with mud. And the problem is the mud, actually. There was just drawn downstream by these barrancos, by these streams. So let me check. So basically, Valencia, let's say that the riverbed in the city center, you might know it already. There are gardens in the Turia and also Calatrava at the end of it, very close to the beach. It means that they have thought of it, isn't it? So, okay, so the city center has been reshaped, but instead the new Turia and the new flow of it, maybe, I mean, again, there is an extreme event there. It's climate change that caused the problem. Yes, and also, however, also the new settlements that were built. So in that area, there are new industrial estates. Typically, they were developed as logistics centers. You know, transport, logistics, they're key when it comes to just promoting your crops and also just moving your goods around. Okay, so it means that you need actually to have urban planning in mind, right? So you needed to work upstream, so to speak, and really be smart about your urban planning. This is because there are extreme events looming at the horizon, and so you need people who are expert in the two things, in urban planning, but also you need for them to just have an idea of the change that is coming from the climate. And the death toll was massive. It's actually 270 people, billions of euros of damage, many people who were displaced, and they had to move elsewhere. So we had something similar in Emilia-Romagna, but in Italy we were very fast at responding. In this case, in Valencia, no, they haven't been as quick. But let me actually say a few words about the response. I mean, that's a case where a just extreme event has also triggered a political crisis because you had people who are mad at the government. You might remember that while the king and queen visited, they got mud thrown at them. Of course, the local people, they were mad at the local government, particularly the provincial government. But the person in case did not actually leave the office. Sanchez decided that he should remain, and there are protests still going on. So there are massive protests against the provincial government because they feel that no answers were given yet. So response. We said delayed response. Indeed, it came very late. So they responded after sometimes days. And there were also people complaining about the fact that the governor, for instance, said just 2 hours before the event that the rain was actually going to stop. It didn't. So the people were outside in some cases. They were just chilling out in front of their house, and you saw the houses are the homes are pretty low, and so the alert came very, very late. So there was no warning. There was no warning, and people complained about that they had not been warned, and that the governor had downplayed it. But then also from the news, we heard also that something might have been caused by the strange organization of the civil protection guards. So again, if you compare that situation to Italy, we are organized in a different way. So it didn't work. But again, we, the journalists who went there, we were shocked because it really took days for the rescue teams, for the rescuers and the soldiers and, people coming. So we also went, for instance, to the guards, La Guardia Civil. We actually went and asked them to come and help. So there were really problems, not just in terms of forecasting and in terms of issuing your warning, but also there were problems in terms of delayed response and also very slow response. The voluntary teams instead, they were very quick. They responded very quickly, but not the official, let's say, not the governmental teams. Now, of course, Venice has also experienced massive floods in the 60s and also a couple of years ago. but let's say that here it's better coordinated. You have sirens, you have horns, you have, you have sensors, you have alerts going on, you have an entire system of warning and early alert system. Thank you very much for your contribution. Let's move on because we have many more people who'd like to just share some ideas. So let's now have a look at the architecture of dwellings and cities. So I would invite Hélène Chartier to come up on the stage. She is the Director of Urban Planning at Design at C40. Please.
Prego, nice to meet you. Prego. E chiedo di salire assieme a lei anche a
Together with her, I would invite Ferruccio Resta, who chairs. He's a professor of applied mechanics at the Politecnico di Milano. We know he chairs the National Center for Sustainable Mobility, and he is also the president of Fondazione Politecnico di Milano, and he was also the dean of the Politecnico. I would now invite Hélène to start, to say something. Can you hear me? Yes. If you can start by explaining what is your contribution in terms of climate change and architecture, the activity of C40.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I prepared a few slides, but I just want to make sure it's not a dialogue. It's more a keynote, right? So I have 20 minutes to present what I wanted to do. Okay. And I'm sorry, I would love to speak your beautiful language, but I can't. And so I'm Hélène Chartier. I'm the director of urban planning and design of C40, which is a major NGO who is helping major cities to accelerate their climate change. And I'm leading all of the work around urban planning and design in this. So I just wanted to, I don't know if this is working. Yeah, I just wanted to show a form of overview of the connection between urban planning and design and the climate change. So just very quickly, we know that urbanization is growing everywhere across the world. Approximately 50% of the world population live in cities today, but we expect this number to go to 70% by 2050, which means adding a city the size of New York every month in the world. So a lot of new towns and cities that will be developed in the coming years. But let's look where this urbanization is growing, is increasing. It's mostly in two main regions, Southwest Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa, while in other regions, actually, the projects are quite stabilizing. It's important to say urbanization is not the problem per se. It might even be an opportunity. The real problem is the demographic growth, but in some way, city could be an opportunity, our best option to preserve natural land and resource, because density in some way will provide opportunities for more sustainable lifestyle, and especially provide adequate transport and facility to adopt this sustainable lifestyle, and I will develop on this one. But these require anticipation and planning, which mean plan enough affordable homes and affordable homes in city, ensure decent living environment, services, amenities, infrastructure for the new population that will come in cities, and also avoid developing on natural on areas that are already identified as dangerous in terms of climate change. It's also important to say we know that all of the cities as part of the network, but most of the cities have now identified what are their main climate risks. They have identified what are their key actions to also reduce their GHG emission. But a friend of mine once said, climate action plan is great, but it's a slide deck. Its objective is target. Now the main objective is really to go from planning to implementation and even what we call in English mainstreaming, like a form of generalization of climate action. And for these, actually, urban planning, master plan, urban planning framework are probably one of the most powerful tools for the local government and city have to do this, because it's legally binding and because it will basically frame a lot of the development and the decision that will be made in cities. Cities have a lot of powers around the use of the land, and it's, as I was mentioning, legally binding and enforceable laws. Urban planning is not a sector of emission. When cities, nations report on their emission, they don't report on land use policies. They report on building, emission from building, they report on transport, they report on waste, but they don't report on urban planning because it's a cross-sectoral tool to accelerate emission reduction and climate resilience, but it's not a sector per se. So I'm going to skip quickly on this one, but we all know what a good urban planning policy will define. It will define the density and the form of the built environment. It will also define the mix of use, services, the mix of people, and their connection with the key infrastructure of the city, especially the transport system. They will also define the space and the quality of the space that will be dedicated to public realm. And we know that in a well-planned city, you should have approximately 30 to 40% of public space and public realm, and also the space dedicated to green, blue, and permeable surfaces in cities. So let me dig a little bit more on the connection between urban planning and GHG emission, because we can speak about adaptation, we'll do that after, but it's like treating a cancer. You can treat the symptom of the cancer, but if you don't treat the disease itself, you don't treat the cause of the disease, you will only increase the consequence of your disease. So it's still very important to focus on reducing GHG emission. And we actually know that the model of urban planning, the one that becomes the mainstream model after the introduction of cars in cities after World War II, is a disaster from a climate perspective. We introduce a new mobility services, cars, and because of that, we have transformed our public space, reduce the space for people, reduce the space for nature to provide more space for cars. But we have also totally destructured our historical city. Why? Because people didn't need anymore this proximity to jobs, this proximity to services, because they could jump on their car to cross the cities and find this function in another part of the city. So instead of winning time, we have extended the distance between the different functions of the city, which means an incredible increase of urban sprawl all over the world and a form of land use fragmentation with a residential area separated from business districts, separated from commercial area, and all of them connected by transport systems that were mainly car-oriented. And all of these visions have actually led to a lot of the challenges cities are facing today. Challenge for the planet, a lot increased GHG emission, increased air pollution, and a big consumption of natural land. But it has not improved the quality of life of people. More, we increase our mobility capacity, but we increase the travel distance and the commute of the people. And we also create a lot of neighborhoods that were lacking basic amenities and services. So in terms of climate impact, which is the entry point of C40 on this topic, the studies are very clear. We know that a good urban planning model could reduce GHG emission by approximately 25% by 2050. So one of the most important actions city can take. And where does this 25% come from? It's important to understand. First, the 25% come from the reduction of transport emission. If you plan well your city, you reduce travel distance and you enable mode shift. We know, for example, that depending on the transport system, if you look just the form of the city, a city with low density like Atlanta has 10 times more emission if you compare to a high density city like Barcelona. It's also reduce naturally emissions from building, because in a city you will have naturally smaller housing unit and shared walls, which has mathematically in some way reduce emission from building, operational emission from building, the emission you need to heat or to cool your home, but also emission to build the housing, what we call embodied emission. We know that a detached home consumes twice more emission to build as a townhouse, for example. So if you want to reduce emission from building, the best things to do is to promote this multifamily compact model of housing. And also by curbing urban sprawl, you will preserve the natural land. And we know natural land and green space are a super way to sequester carbon. So if you combine these three components, a good urban planning will naturally reduce GHG emission by 25%. But today, let's be honest, we are not going at all in the right direction. We know that urban areas are growing up 50% faster than their population. And if we don't change, the size of our city are going to triple in size by 2050. Some research says that this number is super low compared to the reality. They say it might be more than 100%, so twice the population growing that the cities are growing. And who are the worst when it comes to urban sprawl? It's very important to take our responsibility. It's definitely global north. It's definitely, and especially Europe, France, where I come from, Italy, UK, Netherlands are actually the worst students when it comes to urban sprawl, even worse than the North American and the US. If I check, there is actually, since a few years, even a new booming in single family across France. Here the example, 56% of the housing stock in France are single family, and this is increasing. I was reading yesterday an article about UK. Actually, the development of single family in UK 5-10 years ago was around 2% of the new development, and today we are coming back to 49%. So this is a real problem. And actually, the Global South is now also adopting this model, which will become a huge problem. So the emerging trend in the Global North are also focusing not a lot on densification and urban restoration, but mainly through urban growth and expansion. So growing low density peri-urban growth that we are starting to see in Latin America, Africa as well, and this new trend of shiny new cities like Line of New Cairo that are not also going in the right direction. What in come to adaptation and reducing climate risk, we know that, and I'm not going to develop on this one, but first let's speak. When we speak about climate change, it's a polycrisis. It's not just about heat, or it's also flooding, it's also landslide, it's also water scarcity, and for all of these domains, the numbers are showing that all of these will only increase in the coming years. So here flooding, here extreme heat, and I'm not reading the slide, but the numbers are quite alarming, and the same for water scarcity in cities that are going to become a major problem. We see, for example, Barcelona already struggling with water scarcity in the cities. So the climate change is happening already, but and we know these episodes are going to become stronger and more often, but how the way we plan is exacerbating these climate vulnerabilities. That's what is important to look here. So we know that we grow our city more in high-risk area compared to low-risk area. And it's even worse in the Global South. 90% of the growth expansion in the Global South are happening in areas that are already identified as high risk in terms of flooding. And if we look also to the green space in cities, it has fell by 30% in the past 30 years. And we know that green space in cities are our best allied to fight climate change, both flooding and extreme heat. So I just wanted, the previous speaker was speaking about Valencia, but all of the examples are similar here in Brazil. It was interesting because they did a study to show how the way they have planned cities in the past years have exacerbated the catastrophic consequence of the flooding. It has not created the flooding, but it has exacerbated the consequence. Extensive development in risks that were identified are high risk, paving over permeable soil with construction, roads that we knew were basically protecting the other area in the city from the flooding, lacks of the construction standard, and low capacity of enforcement where some development were made without a permit. The same if you look at extreme heat. Here an example from Phoenix in the US, the hottest cities. If you look the way the city has developed, it has only exacerbated the urban heat island effect in the cities. But let's try to talk a little bit about solution and what cities can do to try to reduce this bad urban planning model. Here it's a list actually of what we should not do anymore and what we should try to do. Try really to limit urban sprawl and to instead develop regenerative planning and promote compact and dense cities. Move away from this monocentric city with a dense and mixed-use urban center, and the rest is surrounded by low density and fragmented land use, but instead promote this vision of a polycentric city made of multiple mixed-use and compact neighborhood. Try also to connect the neighborhood with transit-oriented development and a better connection to public transport. Transform our public space to increase space for people, increase space for nature. Try to develop a planning that is informed by the right data to avoid developing in a high-risk area and to secure land for green space in your urban planning policy so they can protect the population from climate risk. And of course, make also sure that all of this transformation is inclusive and includes this form of inclusionary zoning, mandating affordable housing in every part of the city. So this can also be made for everyone. It's interesting because a lot of these principles are actually not very new, and they look terribly similar to the model of historical model of European cities, the one we are here now in Paris, where I live, and other, which were naturally dense, mixed use, and quite walkable. So the idea is not to reinvent the wheel. The idea is to come back to a form of rational vision of the cities. Here, a few examples of cities who are trying to shift their urban planning model. Portland in the US, has now drew an urban growth boundary around the metropolitan area to say no more urban sprawl, only densification of the existing. They reversed all of the single-family zone, no more single-family development in the city, and they try to facilitate a gentle densification with smaller housing units in the city. And it is interesting because it has not only improved climate objective, but it has also reduced the cost of housing by reducing the size of housing and help also this inclusive approach of cities. Interesting to show that a study from Berkeley University in California has shown that this approach that Portland has done is actually the #1 climate action that cities should take. National law, and I want to be a little bit, I don't know how to say it, but like the French government have recently worked on a law that it called Zero Land Artificialization, and that was planning the end of urban sprawl, but so much lobby, and now they are basically coming back to the business as usual. The same in the UK, where they are now basically removing all of the green belts that were established in the beginning of the previous century to allow again the development of sprawling cities. So we are again in Europe not going in the right direction. So it's important, so compact or not compact, I would say this is not the question. A good urban planner knows that you need a minimum of density to make services, infrastructure financially viable and to create this walkable environment. And it's interesting to look at who are the 25 more compact cities in the world. And it's interesting because it's very different nature of cities. It's Paris, it's Barcelona, it's the center of New York, it's some cities in India, it's something. So the question is not compact or not compact. The question is what compact do we want for our culture, for our cities, and what make compact desirable and livable for the people. And actually, compact is not necessarily linked to height. There is even some studies show that middle size, so middle height and high density, like again the European model of cities, are actually the most efficient in terms of GHG emission. It's also important to look, and I think speaking about that in Venice or in other cities, this is important because compact is not just construction, it's about the people who are in the cities. And it's important for cities to look at the use rate or the vacancy rate of their building. Today in France, my country, 8% of the housing are totally unoccupied, vacant. And it's at the national, but it's also in Paris, where we are at the same time living a terrible housing crisis. In Paris, 10% of secondary housing. This means if you add the two, you have almost 20% of the housing stock of Paris with use 3 weeks, 4 weeks per year, while people are struggling to find a decent place to live. And cities, here an example from Vancouver, but I could say Copenhagen, I could say Rotterdam, start to act on this, saying this is not okay. So Vancouver, for example, has developed what they call an empty home tax, which is basically taxing owners who are not renting or not using their housing, and they redirect all of the money from this tax for development of social housing. It has been such, at the beginning, controversial, but in the end, the effect to reduce empty home and to also increase budget for social housing has been so important that now it has been multiplied by 3 and now multiplied by 5. Making compact desirable, it's also thinking of what make a compact city interesting. You accept to live in city because you have also access to well-designed public space. You have also access to services, culture, public transport, commerce, and that's what of the discussion I'm sure you have heard of the 15-minute city was mentioning. There is nothing new here, let's be honest. Anne Hidalgo, Carlos Moreno has not invented anything here. It has been developed by a lot of thinkers, Jan Gehl from Denmark, Jane Jacob, a woman urban planner from the 60s, were already mentioning this vision of a polycentric city made of multiple, what they call complete and walkable neighborhood. Again, here a picture from Jane Jacob. But what is interesting is that since the COVID, and since some like Anne Hidalgo start to push also this idea, Anne Hidalgo, the mayor of Paris, we can see this discussion has become a little bit more important, and actually this is an important way to reassess our urban environment. I just want to say, and I know I'm already over time, so I'm going to pass very, very quickly, but this is interesting because this model is not just for city center. It's also for a metropolitan peri-urban development. Seoul is now planning this polycentric growth by identifying more than 100 local centers that they try to gently densify and reinforce the local amenities in of them. Johannesburg is doing the same. And it's interesting because it's also an opportunity to also accelerate a form of more bottom-up planning. Top-down planning, the one made by the urban planning department of the cities is obviously very important, but we also need, and there is a big push from the resident to also be part of this revolution, and we are seeing this opportunity to mix both. Actually, Milan is doing it right now. They are revising their land use policy, but they are also working on what they call the neighborhood atlas, which is really transforming neighborhood with the resident and identify with them some specific street, some specific project they could develop, and especially the street near the school that they try to pedestrianize and become more child-friendly. I'm going to skip this one, and just to finish by a few examples in terms of climate adaptation. Cape Town in South Africa, and a lot of cities should do that, who finally regulate construction that in areas that are identified at risk, banning construction or adapting construction with specific rules that now need to be. It's also about integrating green space. We were speaking about climate adaptation. We know that green space are our best allied. It's absorb, or impermeable surface, it's absorb the water in the city. It's also provide freshness in the cities, but most of the cities are doing it only through public space. While I was mentioning before, public space is maximum 30–40% of the total land of a city. So we also need to force developers to incorporate in each of their projects a percentage of permeable space, green space. A lot of cities are now. Paris has just made it mandatory, São Paulo in Brazil, and many cities. Medellin has been working on this since already a lot of time, developing green corridor. And it's interesting because I like a lot this diagram, because it really shows the difference of cities, how much with the same climate, the difference of temperature in the city. It could be plus 8% depending of your urban form, plus 8 degrees, sorry, depending of your urban form. But so you will tell me there is a form of contradiction. You say you need compact, but at the same time, city centers are more hot than peri-urban area. But what is interesting in this diagram is actually the drop that shows that incorporating trees in cities will actually help you to really decrease temperature in city, because it provides shade and because it provides natural freshness. And here a few examples and that. I stop here. Sorry if I was late.
Grazie. No, non c'è problema.
It's okay, it's okay. I had a couple of questions. Hello, right. I had a couple of questions. No problem with your timing, it was good. First question is this. As an architect dealing with urban planning, are you concerned about policies that might come along with Trump-like negation? So Trump doesn't believe in climate change at all, nor do his team. So what consequences can we suffer? So if climate policies of the United States change abruptly, can we expect consequences? What is your answer?
It's a good question. I would say yes and no. Yes, because we are, for example, if you take first the North American context, you can see US cities are very progressive. All of the government of US cities are still very committed to this agenda. The problem is that a lot of these studies, a lot of these policies, the one I was mentioning in Portland, for example, can be banned by the federal government. So now the city are trying to pass this type of agenda, but they are scared to be banned by the federal government, to say you are not allowed to put an urban growth boundary. You are not allowed to basically ban single-family housing and everything. I want to say that, but I think in French we have an expression saying you need to, to look at your own place before critique it. Progressive government, I was mentioning Macron government, who, a few years ago was bold in his decision with this zero artificial law. He said, yes, we need to do it. We need to, France is one of the worst when it comes to hypersport. We need to slow it down. So he basically had a target of reducing by 50% to 2030 and to basically aim at zero urban sprawl by 2050. It was bold, so much lobby from developer and lobby also from a lot of small-scale mayors who were saying, oh, that's the dynamism of my city and everything. They just remove it. The UK Labour government has just, removed the green belt from the UK law, which is a catastrophe. And I think there is a lot of national law in Italy that we could also discuss if we had time. So I think, yes, there is a problematic in the US where we can see the national government blocking cities, but at the same time, it's not so great actually in Europe as well.
Vediamo. Grazie. La seconda, velocissima.
Right, second question, and again, see what you can make out of it. Do you have any recommendations for Venice? Ideas for Venice? Any that you have based on your experience? Again, in terms of sustainability, there are many topics, but say one thing that comes to mind, that springs to mind. And maybe, from outsiders, people not coming from the city sometimes have nice ideas.
So I will not mention just Venice, I will mention Italy. I think there is one national law in Italy that is really problematic and doesn't make sense. Is actually there is in Italy a mandatory parking requirement for every new development. That means every new development in Italy, whether you are in the middle of the city center, connected to public transport, or in the middle of nowhere, you need to include parking. And this is dramatic for several reasons. This is dramatic because you will increase car ownership, you will increase car dependency, but also because, especially in city center, that means you need to build underground level. And we know that underground level are the one where you have more steel, you have more concrete, so it's twice more emission from the construction. The same building with 2 underground level is twice more emission from the construction. It doesn't make sense to have such a law for every typology of neighborhood. And Milan and other cities are trying to fight this national law to say we don't need that in the city center. Maybe in some part of the country, yes, but not in the city center. And actually, a lot of cities, including in the US, are now removing their parking minimum and transform it in maximum parking requirement. So that would be my recommendation.
Grazie Hélène. Sì. Okay.
Thanks a lot. Right. So with Elaine, I just let her speak a bit longer. That's because she's very knowledgeable, and I just wanted to hear some ideas from Hélène, in addition to her very nice presentation. Let me now give the floor to Ferruccio Resta. Now, Ferruccio Resta is the president of the Polytechnic Foundation of Milan. Many topics we could address. I understand that you prepare something, so please, yes, just deliver your presentation and then maybe we will ask a couple of questions. Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you again for addressing this topic of climate change. At the beginning of our meeting, Brugnaro, the mayor of Venice, said that you need to look at it in a pragmatic way. I also wish to thank Carlo Ratti, because as a curator of this Biennale, he just triggered very nice ideas, and it's nice to see, all of these ideas being discussed in, let's say, the framework of Venice. Venice is a sort of magnifying lens because it shows history, it shows vulnerability, and we can also see here an acceleration of climate change. Yet Venice is also a very nice example of resilience, because over the centuries it has launched projects, it has made plans to counteract and to respond to, climate changes, in fact. Now, I'm an engineer, and what I do is I plan infrastructure, so sometimes I do cause problems, seen from your perspective. Mobility has maybe one of the highest impacts on the topics being discussed today. But together with the infrastructures, transports can also be part of the solution. I instead want to discuss MOSE, which is another very well-known infrastructure, and I could work with the engineers who planned MOSE. And you can see it, the tide. So February last year, that was actually the trend of tides. Can you see that? So can you see that horizontal line? That's so it had to be raised to 120. That was what was expected. This year it was raised to 110. But as you approach that horizontal line, it means that Venice goes underwater. And you can see that on 4 days in a row, the MOSE was activated and protected the city from the rising waters of the lagoon. And you can also see that trend there. Maybe you can appreciate that in case the MOSE had not been activated, the city would have been literally flooded. Now, the way it works, it's barriers. So they get filled with water and they keep the water out. Now, there are systems that we are planning to implement in the MOSE system having to do with artificial intelligence and forecasts. So, again, weather forecasts, and then a system of sensors that are placed along rivers, for instance, so that you can actually better determine when the MOSE needs to be activated. Because, you know, activating the MOSE is nice, but it costs time, but it does change the organization of life inside the lagoon a lot in terms of, for instance, biodiversity, fishing. The idea was to work it some dozens of time a year. So we have had false alarms, and of course many people complained. I mean, people are always complaining. They complain because you activate it and it was useless, or you activate it and it was activated 10 minutes too late. I mean, that's typical of Italians. We complain every time. But, I mean, MOSE was planned for high floods, so to speak, that have a return time of 1,000 years. So these are really extreme events. The point is that over the years, the return is 100 years. That's how extreme events have become. So that's the reason why I say we need to be better at forecasting. We need to take into account many variables. We need to implement all tools that are available, including artificial intelligence, to guide our actions. This is instead the Autostrade for l'Italia. So that's a motorway, let's say, boardroom. So sometimes you might hear news about how traffic is going. So if traffic is congested, if maintenance or roadworks are impeding traffic. Okay, so you would hear the communication being issued from this center. The fact is that we are also using sensors and drones to monitor the entire network, not just of roads, but also of the environment around it. Because whenever you forecast traffic flows, you also, in case of, for instance, bad weather, you also need to take into account if rivers are in the proximity of roads that might overflow and that might cause problems in the road networks. Or wind. Here, for instance, this is from last year. We had a windstorm, and you have wagons, so train wagons, that were actually made to collapse. In Northern Europe, because of the same storm, there were people who died. couple of years ago, we had Vaya, that was a sort of tornado or hurricane in the woods. I come from Trieste. Trieste is actually famous for its wind called Bora, but I've never seen like train wagons like that. I've seen trucks though. True. A couple of years ago, we were used to seeing pictures like these coming from the other side of the world. Scholars, we were discussing this, but say, scholars, they were maybe more aware, but let's say that as regular citizens, you, a couple of years ago, were used to seeing horrible things happening on the other side of the world. I don't know, wildfires in the Amazon or like this. But then all of a sudden, we have also these extreme events happening in our backyard, so to speak, like Vaya. So, mobility, infrastructures in cities. So, sure, you need to take climate into account there. So, you have climate change, and these are, let's say, exogenous causes linked to global warming, and Helene made it very clear. Inside the city, you tend to have heat islands, and that's one thing. But then you have other things to take into account, because, you see, the problem here is not just, it doesn't have just one dimension, it has many dimensions. One has to do with population trends. And here it's even more complicated because on the one hand side, you say that in some areas of our planet, you have population becoming more dense and population growing and cities becoming bigger. In other areas, you see the aging of population, and in many cases, you have also an early aging of people living in the cities. So here, you also have to manage a sort of social dimension because of demographics. So you cannot take it for granted. There can be people who are very fragile and who live in the city and need to move around in the city, and you need actually to take their needs into account. So mobility inside the cities has multiple goals. So on the one hand side, you want to decarbonize, sure, and you need also to reduce congestion, so traffic congestion. Ratti, a couple of days ago, he opened with an electric water moped. It was a strange vehicle that had a very, I don't know, okay, nice, but I would kind of scared. There was also a bicycle though, sure, but bike sharing, e-scooter sharing, if they're not nicely regulated, they might have detrimental impact on people who are more fragile in cities. So there is a thing having to do with decongesting, then safety. If you deal with mobility, safety must be your concern. And then there is the topic of transition. So we want the public opinion, we want also workers to understand what we are doing. A couple of years ago in Italy, the Draghi government, through the resilience plan, PNRR, it made some funds available, to improve a little bit. So one had to do with mobility, most, and in that case, a network was created to put together the civil society and university. We launched a number of problems. For instance, the public transport board in Milan used those funds to launch electric buses. In Naples, we are working on a fleet of drones, not to transport people, but one of the topics, congestion sometimes has to do with the last mile delivery. So, I don't know, maybe you have fantastic electric cars going around, but then you have a truck that is doing deliveries and all are stuck there and congested. So air mobility might offer a solution to that. So we are experimenting this in Naples now. So drones for deliveries. I'm also thinking of the use of drones for deliveries in mountain areas, valleys, for instance. In some cases, in mountain valleys, like in the Dolomites, you have the problem of congested roads, and you could use the drones for that purpose. And then hydrogen. We mentioned fuels before. Now, hydrogen is also interesting here. It's a combination of green technology, so you do have batteries, electrics, and digital together. China and United States are actually working on the taxi robot. So it's actually a driverless type of car. So the taxi robot is not really something we are looking at. We love taxi drivers, but instead what we want to do is bring in together a couple of concepts. Europe, you might agree with that or not. I don't want to deal with that, but we wanted to be in Europe very conservative and said we do not want driverless vehicles. So we want drivers, human agents, human drivers. So because of the regulations in Europe, we don't have that option. So you have to look the problem from a different perspective. So think of car sharing. It's available in major cities. We have a number of companies in Milan doing that. But today, after an initial wave, sort of booming growth, it's now losing appeal. It was particularly encouraged during the pandemic. But why is it? Well, because typically it's far away. So the car that is available is maybe not very close to me, and then you don't know where to park it. So in Brescia, we tested this. It's some hundreds electric vehicles that can recharge very quickly. So it actually can drive by itself when there are no human passengers in it. So it travels very slowly. But as you get the car, you are driving, and at that point, the road safety regulations apply. So it's a combination. It has never been tested before. It should help just encourage electric vehicles and decongest city. Now, these are car sharing. So the idea is that you reduce the number of vehicles per inhabitant. But it is not entirely driverless, see what I mean? So it's driverless only when it moves by itself. It turns into a regular car as you get it, okay? Now, again, let's say that things are different in the United States. During the Biden administration had made sure that the driverless vehicles were covered by the Golden Power. It means that they had to be developed by countries that were not hostile countries. Now, in this case, I mean, this project is possible also thanks to artificial intelligence. Now, I don't want to just bore you. I can remember soon after getting my degree, I just coded my initial neural network. That was 1998. 1998, you can see that in the trend. You can see how the calculation ability grew. So let's say that the middle horizontal line is the calculator with the highest capacity at the time. And back then, in 1999, it had the same capacity as your smartphone now. So back then, we would just code algorithm, but we had no clue. This is it because it took very long. So we would code them, but they could not be applied. the growth now has been exponential. So right now, the ability to calculate is very similar to the human brain, or even better. The fact is that we are more efficient. They use up a lot of energy, but yet artificial intelligence nowadays is giving us added capabilities. So there are major opportunities. It's actually a major model that links input and output. So say that in the case of the Mose, starting from maps, it would issue warnings and alerts. I can let a drone be flown, and I can instruct through artificial intelligence to take pictures and then assess those images. I can map, for instance, pipelines to see if there are leaks. So it's all possible nowadays, and we need also to accelerate it, because otherwise we just miss an opportunity, like the opportunities that both Italy and Europe missed at the end of the 90s with internet. We were looking at it, and meanwhile some others were developing it. So we need really to accelerate all of this. Now, Draghi said it. It said it to Europe, and didn't say that to the Italians. He said it to the European members of parliament. He said, we are intelligent, we are smart, we can do innovation in Europe. We have too many barriers, and we cannot enact some skill up. That's what he said. So, and I would leave it there. So, driverless automatic cars. That's in San Francisco on the left-hand side. So you have citizens there able to talk to it. On the right-hand side, this is actually a Maserati that was an automatic car. We use it for a race called Mille Miglia, historic cars, nicer, more elegant, sleeker, more fascinating, but it's still a prototype, and that's maybe our problem, the problem of our innovation and research and development in Europe. So we're lagging a little bit far behind. Okay, so I spent some time in Brescia. I worked in Brescia, and I know that Brescia is an industrial city, so it's a vocation. But over the last couple of years, maybe because it had very nice administrations, it just made a leap in terms of becoming more experimental. I don't know, maybe Mazzoncini, who's a visionary guy, has vision. Also gave some input. Let me ask you this question. Artificial intelligence, can it? Maybe yes, but you tell me what. So can it be applied in Venice? So, I don't know, you said maybe, I don't know, you remove the wheels and you use some floating things and maybe you turn into a boat. I don't know. I mean, things like that. But do you have some artificial intelligence solution for Venice having to do with mobility, with vaporettos, with water buses? Not just the Mosel you mentioned already, because mobility in Venice typically you either walk or you take a water bus. That's it, and there are problems. So not much innovation there. So do you have any ideas?
As regards mobility, it will certainly evolve through the evolution of the maritime evolution within the lagoon. I am a member of a number of boards of directors of a number of companies operating in Venice, and the value of an institution, of a university, or of a company resides in data. We have learned that models that are profitable we have to mention profits, because profits mean investments. They come not only from selling the products, but also from getting data. What Facebook or Google did, they gave us an application for free, and we have given them our data in return, and they have grown thanks to our data. Each one of us, the mayor of Venice, should stop for a second. This is not a criticism. And we should make a stock of the data we possess. Venice has a quantity of data that is incredible. International data, multi-generational data, multi-social data. It might read through those data. What will be the change in the society tomorrow, considering a population that is culturally interested? Because if the persons come to Venice, they are guided by tourism, but also by curiosity for culture and for art. So I would certainly develop a project on data analysis to exploit those data. This is something that was impossible 15 years ago, but that can be done now, and it might design something for the future. And if this could be concerted with other European cities, well, this project might really mold a new Europe for the future. We have now a panel with 4 people. Antonello Aurigemma, who is the chair of the Regional Council of Lazio, who will be here with a video contribution. And then we have Pierpaolo Campostrini, the Director General of Corila. We have the representative of COP Alleanza 3.0, Enrico Aurinello. And then we also have Alessandra Credazzi Salvi, who is the person in charge of urban development and infrastructures for the Italian Agency of Cooperation to Development. Nice to meet you all. Welcome. I would start at once with a contribution by Antonello Aurigemma for the Regional Council of Lazio. Because on institutional commitment, I cannot be there. I want to express my appreciation to ASVIS for your important initiative. I decided to send this contribution because I think it is fundamental to face these themes as the president of the Regional Council of Lazio, but above all as the coordinator of the presidents of the parliaments of the different Italian regions and autonomous provinces. I want to thank the organizers for promoting this initiative, the defense of cities and human settlements that are hit by the serious effects of climate change, the rise in sea level, climate events, fires and high temperature, represent events that do not only endanger the people, but also our buildings, our monuments, our historical, artistic and cultural heritage. Venice in particular is a symbol of the fragility of historic cities and of their historic heritage. These workshops should simulate the politicians so that targeted interventions are planned to protect our ecosystem and our heritage, in particular for those activities that refer to prevention. A commitment we should take that also requires rapid and practical actions to guarantee a sustainable futures for our cities and our future generations. I want to thank the organizers for putting at the center of their discussion this theme, and for organizing this event that will enable us to create a network of relationships and discussions among the different institutions so that we can provide concrete responses to these problems. Thank you, Mr. Aurigemma. Let us start with our guests. I will start with Campostrini. We have a number of ideas to discuss. You know the lagoon quite well. We have discussed already a number of peculiarities. We have discussed Mose, not so much. It is important to listen to you about your point of view. I was mentioning Bacan, this sandbank that disappears and reappears, and that has become famous recently as the island that does not exist. A few square meters of bushes and canes. What are the concrete steps Venice is undertaking, or it should undertake? And what is the suggestion Venice might give to the rest of Italy and to the whole of the world? Thank you for this your invitation. I will start with a small ad. As we are at the architecture exhibition, there is a special project of La Biennale di Venezia, of the Fondazione La Biennale di Venezia, that is a special project, a whole pavilion at the end of the Corderia, Tesa dell'Isolotto, that specifically refers to Venice as intelligent Venice, where collective intelligence has been developing for 1,600 years, and that has enabled the city to survive, as the sustainability of Venice is based on having been able to colonize a difficult place to live in, with its ingenuity, a collective ingenuity that was not only made of great scientists, but also ordinary citizens who managed to support scientists and architects and planners to support them with their practical experience. This is the message we send in the pavilion of European Capital of Sustainability Foundation pavilion. Venice in its history has faced change and has managed to adapt to it with a collaboration between nature and culture. And as it has done in the past, it is still doing today. We are optimistic, and we think it can do so with the rest of the world in order to face global challenges. This is, I think, the message we should send from Venice. The lagoon, from a geomorphological point of view, is an environment that is continuously evolving. It is an ephemeral space. It was formed thousands of years ago because of climate change. The last ice era brought the Adriatic to rise by 120 meters in height, and it reached the coast. In the meantime, sediments brought by the rivers created the coastal islands that created what we know today as the Lagoon of Venice. It has continued to evolve with a very fast evolution. Around the year 1000, the climate somehow slowed down, And the ecosystem provided the opportunities to create a port, a flourishing port during the Roman time, for example. And the inhabitants moved towards Aquileia, towards Malamocco, trying to create a communication system. So the very origin of the city of Venice is the result of change. And I was smiling when you mentioned the sandbank, the island of Bacan. A sandbank can be defined an island when it has a permanent vegetation. The islands are different from barene, sandbanks, because they are flooded regularly, and there is only a low-level vegetation, a very specific vegetation. There are no trees, but plants and bushes, alophyll plants. So that area that is close to the port inlets, there have been many changes in recent times. It is sufficient to go back to the beginning of the 20th century when the dikes were, the piers were created to change the currents, and this radically changed the territory. Sant'Erasmo used to be part of the Lido. Now it is an island, and the low level, the tidal islands like Bacan. Bacan means noise in Venetian, and the name comes from the noise of the birds that stop there. Well, these tidal islands are continuing to change, to adapt. The sandbank is moving. In other cases, the sandbanks were modified by a decision of the administrative authorities. The changes decided by the authorities, the diversion of rivers, for example, have prevented Venice from being subjected to huge floods, as was the case in Valencia. Floods in Vienna do not take place because of the modifications to the hydraulic system carried out by Italian engineers. I was wondering whether the lagoon is recording the speeding up of climate change. We have seen this in the graphs about the raising of the Mose. It is true that over the last 2 years we have had a number of high tides that were unprecedented in the history of the city, not only in terms of intensity. We have had some events that could exceed the level reached in 1966. We can certainly say that the frequency of the events was much higher than it used to be in the past. There has been an increase over the last few decades of the frequency of the floodings. In my life, I was flooded 314 times. I was born in 1960. My father was born in 1930. He experienced less floodings than I did. I am younger than he was, but I have experienced more events of high tide than he did. My nephew, who was born in 2020, has never experienced a high tide thanks to Mose, and this is a clear evidence of the changes in social life, what Venice would be without Mose. Mose has been closed 100 times so far, and those high tide events would have made the city really unlivable for the citizens. We are experiencing a dramatic change now. We are wondering what happens at the ground floors of the cities because they are inhabitable again. They weren't inhabitable in the past because of high tides. They can be inhabited today. We should try and understand what the market is doing to these ground floor apartments. Well, they are turning into tourist residences. We should prevent the market from doing this. They should take up different urban functions. We should be aware that a city can be revived by using the ground floors that were unusable before. There is a huge interest in making these spaces available for public use. Venice is a symbol in this sense. The type of events. Somebody mentioned before forecasting methods that are extremely sophisticated. The high tide of 2019 was not forecast correctly. Our forecasts should be corrected by statistics, and we should reduce the rate of uncertainty. That event had never taken place before. It was a kind of tropical typhoon we had to face in 2019. We had never seen anything like that before. The model had not forecasted correctly. There were no statistics of that type. It was impossible to forecast. And this is the situation we are facing today. We should try and adapt to these new events. We do not only have Mose. Mose is the most important tool, the most apparent part of a more complex system to protect the city. You mentioned St. Mark's Square, the lowest part of the city that is being protected, becoming waterproof. We are trying to protect it, and it is the most precious part of the city. We have installed a barrier in front of the St. Mark's Church, in St. Mark's Basilica. We couldn't wait another 4 or 5 years. Since 2022, there are no floodings in the Church of St. Mark's. Before we did this, it was flooded for more than 700 hours a year, and the marble was becoming fragmented, disgregated by the salt contained in the lagoon water. And seeing marble disgregating because of the water was terrible for us. After the implementation of that glass barrier, we were granted that water would no longer reach the front part of the church where mosaics are located. We started the restoration of the church, and the adaptation also depends on our ability to take the correct actions. Enrico Quarello, Communication Department of Coop Alleanza. Can you tell us something about Coop Alleanza? Because we normally refer to larger distribution, but there is a lot more than that.
Thank you for having me. And yes, so in fact, we are in large-scale retail trade with our stores, called COP, but it's primarily actually a cooperative with citizens being the members of the cooperative. So we don't have really just one employer. We are accountable vis-a-vis our members, which means that our policies are very much addressed to, not just informed or influenced. They are meant to meet the needs of our members, and we want to really meet. That's our mission. We really want to meet their needs. So what about the action at this point? So what is the action that a cooperative like yours can perform in terms of raising the awareness of topics connected to climate change? Well, first of all, commitment, because we actually have 7 mission points, and the 7th point has to do with sustainability, and we want actually to accompany communities where we are present to help them mitigate the effects of climate change. However, in terms of what impact can we have, like, on Venice, now, the city center of Venice is becoming more and more depopulated. So the city center itself is less than 50,000 inhabitants, so very small, in fact. So just remove the visitors, remove the tourists, but there is actually in Campo San Bartolomeo a counter that tells you how many people. But, I mean, we have 35,000 members, though, in Venice. COP has as many members. It means that we are basically present in each and every household in Venice. So what does it mean? It means that we can actually talk to them, and we can create a report, we can create a dialogue to make sure that there is a proactive type of approach in the policies that we use. Of course, we are not urban planners, so that is not our role at all. We cannot do that. But of course, we can help resilience, and we are actually working towards improving the resilience. It has to do with our approach vis-a-vis the city. Think, for instance, that in the city center, we have 19 stores. Our main competitor has just 7 of them. We chose to have 19 so that we are present in a capillary way, and it is to meet the needs of our members, the citizens of Venice, not really the tourists. So this has, of course, an impact in terms of logistics. This is because we move goods around, and we have some 250 trucks every month, and the last mile goes on boats. Just a little innovation that we've been working on starting 2023. Together with a partner of logistics in Venice, we inaugurated back in 2023 the first electric boat to transport goods. So in that case, it's actually a smaller impact due to the electric engine, but we've also changed the hull so that it creates less waves. So not only have we helped logistics because because of the fragility of Venice, we want to have a delicate impact, so to speak. But also, we are trying, for instance, to help sustainability also in terms of having a shorter supply chain. So together with our members, we have launched more local producers. Right, so product sustainability, you said that, and it reminded me of something that our colleagues from Nuova Venezia have been telling me. Here in Venice, back then, it was actually the only place in Italy where I would see the front and back of a sheet of paper were both printed in Venice. They were not elsewhere. And they explained to me that it was because it took time, effort, and money to transport paper in Venice or other goods in Venice. So they wanted to make the best and to make a meaningful use of those things. Now, we now have instead Ikes. We would like to learn more about Ikes. Alessandra Credazzi. Yes. Well, I want to thank with some words about how grateful I am that I've been invited here. ASVIS is doing a fantastic thing here. I work here as an architect, and my agency deals with international cooperation projects with the support also of the Italian government. We deal with fragile countries, not just from the point of view of climate change, but a number of different dimensions. So we really try to use the SDGs and the Agenda 2030 as a compass for our cooperation projects. In terms of climate change, we try to incorporate in any cooperation initiative, not just those dealing with the environment, the environmental mainstreaming ideas. It means that we always, in any project that we launch, we always pay attention to the environmental impact of the activities we are planning. We want also to incorporate the assessment, the environmental assessment, and what the climate change might do. So, pioneer countries. They make some commitments, and we develop strategic documents. We draw up strategic documents, and then we launch initiatives dealing with urban planning at large, because urban planning, as you know, also has to do with social planning, with territorial planning. It is about creating partnerships. It is about creating alliances. So my agency is also developing tools. And because we are here and we are discussing this topic, we have a manual, for instance, to regenerate slum cities. And the previous speaker, she made the point that you need actually to reduce land use, reduce our impact on the use of land. So we really, because of that concern, we want to focus on regeneration. So we have a manual specifying actions, and then inclusion, participation, engagement of local communities using and harnessing their expertise, all using their intangible assets, intangible heritage, and also we want to appreciate their differences, because working with people, we believe, is the real the great chance we have. So, and people know a lot, so you need to listen to them. So we have created manuals for climate risk assessment, carbon footprint on climate change. This has been drawn up right now. So we really try to use guidelines rather than strategic tools, because it's the foreign ministry of Italy that gives the strategy. But we try to really develop guidelines for the entire Italian companies that work in the field. What about, do you then disseminate this? Sure, yes. So the agency, my agency, started in 2016, but of course we had been active in the field of cooperation and international cooperation for many years before then. So what we are trying now is really creating very specific tools so that they can be used in a in a quick way. Like, for instance, I've been working for many years for the non-governmental organizations before I joined this governmental agency. And I realized that you actually need tools to really assess the impacts of any cooperation project and whether it is sustainable or not in environmental and social terms. So, for instance, the manual for the regeneration of slum cities, you have in there a number of instruments to assess the situations before, during, and after your actions. Cooperation, though, I'd like to add this. Cooperation, of course, is active in different contexts, so it is important that you connect the different contexts, the different dimensions. This is another challenge of growth and development. What we try to do is to just look at the international agendas. So I nerve and Gemma for sustainable urban planning, or the Sendai, or for the anticipatory reaction. I mean, it's all connected. You cannot just talk of cities. You also need to look at the city, but with the neighboring areas, for instance. And because we are also very much interested in the impacts that climate change has in terms of people's wealth, so poverty, and how climate change impacts on the most deprived populations, we, in many cases, we look at the just sometimes informal areas of cities, the outskirts of cities. People who live in areas that are somehow ephemeral, not well organized. So usually the outskirts are indeed inhabited by people who, because of different reasons, not being happy with the situation where they come from, they just migrate to the city. So they begin to occupy and settle in peripheral areas. So the cooperation projects, they look at these informal areas of the city, and they work in these, so to speak, secondary cities. Secondary cities, these are cities that are not overpopulated, they are not overbuilt, they may have different sizes, but they can still grow in a sustainable way. So they have a room for growth in a sustainable way. Thank you. Right. So I thank all of you. We have a final section, and I would like to just call on stage a few more people. So Maria Enrica Danese, who is the Director of Corporate Communication and Sustainability in TIM, Telecommunication. Then we have Laura Fregolent from the University UF of Venice, so we will be talking about architecture. Then Simone Ombuen from the University Roma Tre, who is the coordinator of the GDL 11 of the Alliance Sustainable Development. He has promoted today's initiative. And Elena Yakia, I'm sorry, I missed you. Elena Yakia, yeah, sure. She is the director of the environment sector of Fondazione Cariplo. This is actually a bank foundation, and she's also involved in ASVIS. Sorry, Elena, for not calling you before. Okay, so let's start from Maria Erica Danese. Would you like a few words talking about communication and sustainability? TIM is actually a telephone company, telecommunication company in Italy. What about it? Communication and sustainability. Good question. I was kind of expecting it. Hello. Right, so if you could answer that question, then I might ask you to devote more time talking about the digital aspect of your communication. Well, sustainability, if you have a listed company nowadays, you must have sustainability. The sustainability topic must be well organized. So you have it from the board of directors level down to the middle management and down to the line. So communication, sustainability. This is actually an accomplished marriage, so to speak. This is because it's a core value. So in corporate companies, you do have sustainability featuring as a core principle. So talking about sustainability is also just foregrounding what the company is doing, is just enhancing or just making clear what the company is doing for its customers. What about the contribution? I mean, the practical contribution of a digital infrastructure to the sustainability and the growth of Italy? Well, we do have a business plan, and our business plan contains different chapters. One is about the growth of the digital, linked to two main aspects, main goals. So we want to digitalize the cultural heritage of Italy. Italy has one of the largest cultural heritages worldwide, and then improving actually the conditions of our people. Now, we've been working in Venice for a number of years already. This is a sort of a gym, consider it like this. It's a test bed. So if you do things correct in Venice, you can then expand them. I think we started back in 2019 or 2020, and we designed a control room here in Venice. What is it? Well, it's actually a hub of innovation. It still is very innovative, although it's 5 years old already. What does it do? Now, through the 4G and the 5G, so this is the telecom network, connected to the sensors that we placed throughout the city, across the city. Of course, we work together with a municipal corporate company of Venice. So, together with the sensors and the artificial intelligence that can actually process what the sensors fit to it, we have designed a service for the city that is multi-layered because it has to do with the improvement of the water traffic, the tidal the tidal growth or urgent response. For instance, in case of whatever it is, it can be the hospital or it can be a leak or whatever. And then pollution. This is also something that we've been working on. So we have also been dealing with pollution. So the control room has been active, and it governs, so to speak, the flows of data. But it's very innovative, I tell you. It is so innovative that together with the Fondazione Venezia, sorry, I am being distracted by my phone. I keep getting calls from my doctor. Well, I said it's so innovative that we have actually presented it at the Biennale. So go and have a look at the description that we made available at the Biennale di Architettura. That's actually very, very, very interesting. I think you'll find it very interesting. Okay.
Laura Fregolent of the UAV University of Venice. Can you tell us what you are taking care of? And then we will discuss inhabiting the sustainability in housing. I join the other speakers in thanking you for creating this opportunity of discussion. I am a professor at UAV, the Architecture University of Venice. I am an architect, but I also teach urban and territorial analysis. This is my study sector. I work a lot with Venice and the Veneto region. I am looking at the city both in terms of research and in educational activity. The problems linked with inhabiting are certainly topical for all of us, and they are important not only for Venice. I agree with those who say that Venice can be considered as a living lab. Not only doing something here makes it easier to do the same elsewhere, but we can also say that Venice is a city lab because it enables us to see from very close practical problems and solutions that can apply to urban contexts in general. Can you give us some examples? If we look at housing, for example, inhabiting rather as a whole, because a house is a system of relations. It is a dwelling, first of all, but it is also a system of relations, of services that have to be maintained. The dramatic drop in the number of inhabitants and residents has an impact on services, has an impact on, as we are discussing with ASVIS, is impacting goal number 11 of sustainable cities by reducing the number of services available in a city, school services, transport, health services, but also commercial activities that are endangered by a drop in the number of inhabitants, and on the other, on an increase in tourist flows. And this is something we are experiencing everywhere in Europe, in the European cities that are all faced with this problem, in particular historic cities. But it is something that, in different scales, is taking place everywhere. Venice allows us to create a system with the different issues it is facing. It is a city where there are no cars and where tourist flows can have a strong impact. They create very serious externalities on public transport, on housing, by taking away houses from the private market to transfer it to tourism, overlapping with residential activities with different needs. Of course, and this is not the only reason. There are a number of both internal and external reasons. But we can say that the effects we can measure at the local scale are very clear. An overall impoverishment of the housing system and a polarization of the users of certain services. Going back to the goals, goal number 11 or number 17 in the UN, among the UN goals, have shown that governmental action are fundamental in terms of cooperation and collaboration. This is what characterizes sustainability. There is a need to have a number of different scales in our intervention, but we should also involve a number of different stakeholders, public and private institutions, the service sector, in general, they all have to be involved in our activities. Sustainability in terms of places to inhabit should be discussed in terms of decision-making processes with a new method for decision-making. And on the other, we should be able to valorize the practices of taking care in general. This is an issue that can include all stakeholders in the system. There are sectors in which sustainability is very difficult to reach. Goal number 5, gender equality, for example, is an extremely related issue. When women have temporary jobs, they do not have long-term jobs. When women have lower wages and short-term contracts, and we might discuss the laws, fair salaries. Well, there is a direct impact on the city because there are no adequate services so that women can make the necessary choices in terms of life and work to be adequately protected. One last thing, the role of UAV, of the Architecture University of Venice. What about the university? How important it is to have universities act in molding the cities. They are important stakeholders in our cities. Do you feel you are sufficiently considered? I think that there is a small gap about our experiencing universities in the city. They are part of the academic world, but they are seen as researching institutions, but they are not considered as able to implement concrete actions, which is not true. What we develop among the walls of the university should be implemented by the businesses, by the industries in the territory. Thank you. Elena Iachia, Cariplo, a banking foundation. And foundations are very important. I direct the environmental department in Fondazione Cariplo, and I deal with the activities related to climate change, natural resources, and education to sustainability.
And what about the function of a foundation in this context of sustainability and climate and fight against the climate change? Sure. That's precisely the point I wanted to make. So it's what we can do as foundations to help public administrations, government administrations, municipal administrations in specific, to fight against climate change. Now, we've been doing that since 2020. Cariplo has been doing that. And what we've tried to do was to making administrations more aware of their role. So Hélène Chartier, thank you very much for what you said. So she talked about urban planning, and she made very clearly the point that urban planning can help a lot when it comes to mitigation, when it comes to, well, dealing with climate change. Resilience is here the key word. You need to make city centers more resilient to climate change. And in that case, the banking foundations are there to help municipal governments and local governments, because it takes actually a team. You need the different councillors to understand what the point is. You need expertise, you need professionalism to make sure that the policies are meaningful and they leave no one behind. That has been our goal over the past years. So we have always tried to be very respectful of local administrations, but at the same time, we wanted to spur them. We wanted actually to encourage them so that they would implement very clearly what they pledged to do. So, for instance, strategies, the definition of strategies for the climate transition. Now, we are talking about, for instance, of medium, larger sized cities like Brescia. Or smaller, maybe, communities made up of different municipalities. I'm thinking of Brianza, which is in the south of Lombardy, or Val Seriana, which is in the north of Lombardy. These are like communities of more municipalities. In those cases, we help them develop strategies, but we also help them with specific actions. So what about actions? Well, from floorings in the cities and forestation, so planting of trees. Or we also just add the environmental dimension to the planning instruments they're already using. Let me just quote another example, which is actually, for instance, the support to the energy networks, which are or energy cooperatives. That's what they are called. So these are communities. Can we maybe explain what they are? So what are these energy communities? Well, renewable energy communities. This is about the production and consumption of energy from renewable energy sources. So, and there are indeed communities that build around producing and consuming such energy. So we just promote them. The idea is that it's now possible. I mean, from a legal point of view, because there are laws about them. Of course, they came a bit late, but they've now started. So since they've started, we are now helping them because now the regulations are there, but still they are meeting with difficulties when it comes to defining, for instance, the drawing up the bylaws or how they should work. So we help them, we help these entities becoming established and remain up and running. We are also helping, for instance, non-for-profit organizations, including parishes sometimes. Papa Francesco, so Pope Francis, with the Laudato Si is encyclica, had encouraged that. So there are also some parishes that are promoted actions for sustainability that we are supporting. Together with ASVIS, over the past 12 months, we've been working a lot on the topic of climate change. And the banking foundations have shared best practices. All of us had had developed some. We've organized an event where we invited also external discussants to have a look at what we had done. So because we work a lot as foundations to help, for instance, non-for-profit organizations and entities, schools, I said, or other entities to help them raise the awareness of topics related to environmental protection, climate change, there's energy communities. I believe that we need to maybe change the mindset a little bit and wear these environmental and climate change glasses so that through that lens, through those lenses, through those glasses, you try and understand what your actions might lead to. I mean, what the repercussions of what your actions could be on the environment. Okay, thanks a lot. Now we have our last speaker from Roma 3, yet another university. So, Simone Ambuen, would you like to say a few words about what you do? And I don't know, I saw you jotting down a couple of ideas. Maybe you want to share those with us. Well, I do coordinate the ASVIS work group. Now, ASVIS has got a number of work groups, not 17 like the SDGs, but we have a number. And what we want to do is that we want to coordinate all of these different work groups. We nowadays have 350 entities that belong in this alliance, ASVIS alliance. And so we want their voice to be heard. So we are there to help launching dialogues with the civil society, with organizations, including through initiatives like this one or like those staged during or in the framework of the Festival of Sustainable Development. We want to give the floor to people who wish to say something, and we also want to promote some work methods that are typical of, like sustainability, so to speak. The idea is that you encourage fair dialogue, so you also embrace diversity, and you try to find alliances even around differences. So instead of exacerbating differences, you just appreciate differences, you appreciate diversity, and then you talk about even differences in a fair way. What about your work group? So your work group has to do with SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities. That's right. So we are at the very center because, in fact, cities and communities are at the core of anybody's life, because there is a place where one lives, where one works, and this typically occurs in communities and cities. So we produce policy briefs and we produce documents where we try to use our soft power to lobby for improvement. And again, we send those briefs to the different administrations at different levels, local, but also European. So nowadays, for instance, well, today, really, there is a position paper we produced on the application of a new administration law. It's actually a novel regulation that was introduced, and we have a position paper that we've drawn up. We've distributed it to 40 entities. What about the situation? Well, the situation is difficult. There are many mistakes that have been done, and we are in troubles. We have issues. Let me also be specific about this. There is something that we still miss, which is the size of the problem. So Italians, I don't know, maybe it's a problem that we Italian people have, that we struggle with quantities. We don't want to hear about quantities. We just sometimes complain without having the real size of the problem. Like we are complaining about over-tourism in Venice, but you can do that if you measure it. So like in Venice, we do have over-tourism because we measure some 13 million tourists compared to 500,000 50 years ago. There used to be 175,000 inhabitants 50 years ago. We now have less than 50,000. See, so you can do things only if you have the quantities right. And again, what you mentioned there about Venice and the city center, you know, living in a city center, living there as a resident or as a tourist, but spending more days there. Well, spending more days there or just spending some hours there, it makes the entire difference, because if you stay some days, stay some longer, enjoy some time, you again, maybe you appreciate better what the history of the place is like, what the tradition is like. You can study it in the textbooks, but it's not the same thing, because if you are in a place, you just, through empathy, through exposure, you can get to understand that place better. And you can also develop a certain empathy that then would help you engage in protection of the place. So that's true if you really live in a place. And again, talking about Venice, like over the past 50 years, the number of people in the world have doubled, and much more education has been provided to them. Yet, there is an imbalance, a very strong imbalance between the supply and demand when it comes to culture. So because people are better educated, they want to discover city centers firsthand, so not mediated by textbooks. And yet these city centers are struggling because they don't know how to supply all of this. So there is an imbalance, if you see, because of more people having become educated and wanted to discover city centers. City centers sometimes struggle because there is an extra demand and there is a constraint in the supply. And against all this, we have the backdrop of climate change, and climate change requires adaptation. Now, cities, of course, they've adapted, and they are a response to the need of people. So it's the environment getting adapted to the needs of people. But the point is that you have cities that must offer urban services in a safe way. So they need to keep safe the people wanting to visit them. And that means an extra effort. Now, it's particularly true for Venice. Venice is doing a lot, is doing many things. It's also sometimes strugglings are because there is not a comparable commitment on the part of national government institutions, for instance, or other entities around the world. Because, you see, Venice is really an epitome of historic cities in the world. So the cognition of what it means to be a historic place, of the values of historic places, is sometimes not there. It would deserve more. It should take more awareness on the part of everybody of the importance of historic cities and city centers. And we try to promote that. We try to promote that culture. And sometimes we do struggle because not everybody wants to listen to us. Good, and I believe that that is a nice way of just moving on to our conclusion. So thank you very much for your presentations. And I'm going to invite on the stage Enrico Giovannini, who is the scientific director of ASVES. So if you'd like to say a few words. It's just by way of conclusion. I'm also going to sit down so that we make ourselves comfortable in having a little chit-chat about what we've been saying in the morning. So maybe we sum up a couple of the key ideas. So wrapping up and summing up, if we had to draw some conclusions, I think that we touched upon very many topics, and they would deserve a bit more expansion. But I believe this is a very interesting meeting, isn't it? I mean, it's a small meeting, and yet it is being followed by many people. So what do you think about this?
Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for following us so far. If I may give you a number, we have had, thanks to the media that have transmitted our streaming, ANSA, Facebook, ANSA, Radio Radicale, and the media of the Northeast media, 332,000 contacts during this workshop. People who have seen our pages while the live streaming was going on. Only in the end we will know the real numbers, but if you can just see the first figures, we had 1,200,000 contacts in the first few days of the exhibition. So we can say that it is a very high figure, and we hope today we will confirm this trend. And this because the themes we are dealing with concern all of us. They concern the people and the places we live in. What can we say about such an intense morning of activity related to biodiversity faced in and discussed in Genoa last week? The cities are the place for biodiversity between center and peripheries, between nature and built environment. But very often these places destroy biodiversity, and so there is discomfort. We are in Venice, which is the symbol, not only as the mayor mentioned, of an extraordinary ability to be resilient against climate change, but also to anthropic change. But we are in Venice also because it is a place where the connection among ecosystems and anthropic areas is difficult and is extremely fragile and sensitive. But as one mentioned before, rather than being blocked by our fears, we should instead be proactive, and science, data, and many other tools we have heard mentioned today prove us that many cities are following the same trend in Italy and elsewhere. The work carried out by universities, research centers, but also by the civil society helps us to trust in the future. We basically need 4 ingredients. The first is the capacity, and we will discuss this tomorrow in the future day we will launch at Procuratie Vecchie. After 2 years of analyses and discussions and 1 year of construction of the project, we need to have an idea for our future. Unless we have the idea of the future we want, what kind of cities can we build? What kind of communities are we going to build? What kind of places are we going to inhabit? And it is not so easy to have an idea about the future. This morning, and I would like to thank La Biennale that has given me its terrace on the St. Mark's Basin. I was there for a video conference with the National School for the Administration. At the end of a project that has gone on for 2 years, they have published a report that will be discussed in the event in Venice, focusing on strategic foresight, not any future, the future we really want to build The 2030 agenda is certainly the framework for the future we are trying to build up. Agenda 2030 is the result of the international conference Rio +20 with the final report, The Future We Want. So first ingredient is what kind of future do we want to build? It has to be a sustainable future from many points of view, a lasting future, a future enabling the future generations to benefit from what we are benefiting from in the name of intergenerational fairness principle. And this is not an ingredient we all agree upon, which is the first problem. When the US a few weeks ago declared they are against, official declaration, they are against the 2030 agenda, they should ask themselves a few questions. It is true that we do not all agree on what we should do and where we want to go. And from this point of view, Venice can still be the emblem of the situation. Should we transform it into a museum, a place where over-tourism prevails every day? Should it be a place where hydrocarbons rule? And at this point, we can say that the European Union and the different organizations operating like C40 can help us understand that there is an idea of future that is emerging, and it is an idea of a sustainable future. And as we say in Rome, you can do it. We can do it. But together we should share this future. Second ingredient, technology. Without technology, transformations do not take place. Without it, we cannot manage the pressures we are subjected to. And the presentation by Ferruccio Resta and the center that was created for sustainable mobility can be considered as a response that is possible thanks to new technologies, but also thanks to the organization of the networks. Again, we can do it. We have extraordinary tools available. They should become usable for everybody, and they should also be harmonized, coordinated, and managed in an open way. Third ingredient, governance. And our country, we know, is a miracle from this point of view in terms of ability to survive. Just think of this territory, but think of our cities, of many other places where state power, regional power, municipal power intertwine, clash with one another, fight with one another, and instead, many times they perfectly go on together. I should bring back one of the proposals, historical proposals by Asvis. How can the government not avail itself of a tool to coordinate the policies for the cities? There are common tools for internal areas and not for the cities. We tried to do this with the Draghi government, with an interministerial committee for urban areas, but it never managed to meet. But the decree, ministerial decree on that occasion was mentioning the urban areas as a matter of interest for state action. The good news is that many municipalities are trying to organize themselves autonomously, and the network of the sustainable municipality is a clear sign of this vitality. But unless we, and this is my point of view, unless we fairly distribute responsibilities among state, regions, and municipalities, it will be very difficult to cooperate, as metropolitan cities have an extraordinary role. Research centers, and on Thursday we had the Future Biodiversity Center that is working for the development of research in this sector. Well, those centers should all agree on the type of governance we want. One last ingredient, people. Without people, cities do not exist. And people sometimes run away from the cities, or they run towards the cities, depending on the services, as somebody mentioned before, but also depending on the vitality of the civil society, of the universities, of research institutions, of the cultural initiatives cities can offer. People are afraid in this moment. They are concerned. They are shattered by the different messages they are subjected to. Allow me to conclude by recalling the message of the new Pope, Lion XIV. Something he said yesterday, maybe, speaking to the media. Let us unarm our speeches, our words, and instead words stimulate the clashes when there are proposals to do something. Pagnoncelli wrote a book and he mentions 30%. Anything you do, you have 30% of the people who are against you. 30% is not a small percentage. If media stimulate contrasts among the different percentages of the population, and in the cities it is very easy to have these contrasts. Being a mayor is one of the most difficult jobs in our everyday life. We should try and start putting together our ideas. You're right, this is true. I must say that the level of conflictuality also depends not so much on the media, who take advantage of this, but it originates from the political positions of our governors. We need a different type of political activity by the media, by our governors, by the lawmakers. When I listen to Trump saying certain things, yesterday night I got at the airport, took a taxi, and the taxi driver told me, "Are you the former Minister Giovannini?" And I asked him whether I was allowed to get to Venice. With the Draghi government, and I mentioned this in my interview, Mose was certainly a great result. It can help the city. I remember the discussions whether it was useful or not. Large ships. We stopped large ships from entering the lagoon. We have connected the airport of Venice with high-speed trains. Well, on that occasion, I understood how Venice can really create huge turmoils in terms of discussions and differences in opinions. Venice is like a vase of Pandora. If you try to face a problem there, you unchain lots of different reactions. Politics is part of the role of the media and of our governors. It is a whole set of things. But it was very interesting for me because Mose was protecting the city. The airport was giving an idea of development that was different from large ships getting into the canal. Electric boats the city is able to adapt to climate change. It does not renounce its characteristics, but it is discussing how it can change in order to move in the right direction. And media, in this sense, should try and do what we are doing as ASVIS from a cultural point of view. That is to say, trying to give an overall view of the problem rather than facing each problem separately from the other problems, thus creating contrasts and adverse reactions. Cities and artistic heritage can only be protected by putting the different pieces together. And last but not least, what happened last Thursday is extremely important. The Italian Senate has approved the law, has passed the law submitted by the government, providing for the need to assess the intergenerational impact of the laws. Paragraph 1 of the main article promotes intergenerational fairness of the laws in line with the new article, with Article 9 of our Constitution. But the article requires all of us to take into account fairness, intergenerational fairness. Therefore, assessing the artistic heritage as not something that can pass by like a gust of wind, but rather like something that should remain available for future generations. We will meet again at 2 p.m. today in the Arsenale. Tomorrow, Future Day, here in Venice at the Procuratie Vecchie, in the headquarters of Generali in St. Mark's Square. I invite you all to be there for the launching of this Future Day. So I wish you all a happy future. Thank you all for listening.